Hi everybody, this is Stephan, author of the Great World History book, and today we're going to talk about one of the most important works in world history, namely Aristotle's Metaphysics. We will speak about Aristotle's convictions about truth and knowledge, about causation, about the nature of matter in the universe, and his conception of God. So let's dig right in. To start with, here we see a famous bust of Aristotle, so you know what he looked like. And here we see a mosaic of the school that Aristotle attended. This was Plato's academy. Aristotle was Plato's most famous student. So let's start right now. In the 4th century BC, Aristotle wrote the first major work on what is called metaphysics, the study of the fundamental nature of reality. The term metaphysics was likely coined by a 1st century editor, so centuries after Aristotle's death, who assembled various lecture notes of Aristotle into that treatise that is now known as Metaphysics. Metaphysics actually means after the physics, for supposedly you first had to read Aristotle's book called Physics, and afterwards you started on this work, the Metaphysics. The work, the Metaphysics, starts by defining human beings by their capacity to pursue knowledge, a characteristically Greek idea of describing human beings. We quote, and this is the first line, "All men by nature desire to know." More than any of the earlier peoples, the Greeks trusted in the rational capacity of human beings to understand the universe. Aristotle wrote, "The animals other than men live by appearance and memories, but the human race lives also by skill and reasonings." Aristotle then credited the earliest philosophers of Greece for their pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. We quote, "They were pursuing science in order to know, and not for any utilitarian end," so not for any practical purposes. It was when almost all the necessities of life had been secured that such knowledge began to be sought. And we continue, "For it is owing to their wonder, the wonder of those earliest philosophers, that man began to philosophize. They wondered originally at the obvious difficulties, and then they advanced little by little to the greater matters. For instance, about the phenomena of the moon and those of the sun and the stars, and about the genesis of the universe." Aristotle then set out to investigate what type of knowledge is the most fundamental. He recognized that men of experience often succeed better in life than those who have theory without experience. Yet men of experience often don't know why things are the case. They don't, quote, "know the causes," and therefore they cannot teach others what they know. He therefore finally concluded that only theoretical knowledge can get us to the truth. We quote, "It is right that philosophy should be called knowledge of the truth, for the end of theoretical knowledge is truth, while that of practical knowledge is action." But what is the most fundamental knowledge? According to Aristotle, it is about knowing the nature of existence itself. And this requires us to understand the nature and causes of the substance that everything in the world is made of. We quote, "The fundamental duty of a philosopher is to gain possession of the principles and causes of substances. That is the goal of metaphysics." This investigation, he claimed, even goes deeper than physics. He writes, "Natural science is a kind of philosophy, but it is not the first philosophy." So what is the difference? With physics we only describe the natural world, but metaphysics is the study of what Aristotle calls being qua being. So what does he mean by that? Being qua being means that it is about knowing what it means for an object to exist. What are the prerequisites for something to exist? What makes something exist? That was the very deep question that Aristotle was asking himself. So what is substance according to Aristotle? After much deliberation in the book, many contradictory statements even, Aristotle finally concludes that it is either matter, form, or a composite of the two. Well, today we equate substance with matter. It's the material everything is made of. The inclusion of form seems very curious from a modern standpoint. To Aristotle, the form of, say, a statue is so close to its essence, even closer than the material that statue is made of, that the form of something was very important in the definition of what it meant to be a substance. Well, today we just see the form of something as like a particular arrangement of atoms, that's all. At some point, Aristotle also argued that the attributes of substance, such as its color, its size, its mass, its temperature, and so on, cannot be the essence of a substance. Instead, the essence must be the bearer of these attributes. So if you would take away all the attributes of a substance, what is left over, that is the essence of substance. This hypothetical substance without attributes was later called prime matter. This idea, prime matter, became very influential throughout history in different sciences, especially in alchemy. Yet Aristotle in this very text eventually dismisses it. He concludes that if one would subtract all attributes from a substance, including even its shape, we, quote, find nothing left over. It doesn't mean anything. If we take away all the attributes, we have nothing left, according to Aristotle. Nevertheless, that idea persisted. Aristotle then notes that his predecessors, those earliest philosophers, quote, did not all agree as to the number and nature of substance. So what is substance made of? For instance, the Greek philosopher Thales believed that everything in the world was made of water. Heraclitus believed everything was made of fire. Empedocles recognized the famous four elements, and Leucippus believed that atoms were the building blocks of matter. So many different ideas. Pythagoras had yet another idea about the fundamental nature of substance. He had discovered that musical notes could be described mathematically, and therefore he came to believe that everything in the world was made of numbers. Aristotle wrote about it. He saw that the ratios of musical scales were expressible in numbers. Since then, all other things seemed in their whole nature to be modeled on numbers. He claimed numbers to be the elements of all things, and the whole heaven to be a musical scale and a number. Aristotle disagreed with Pythagoras. It is true, he claimed, that the shape of an object can be described mathematically by geometric surfaces, but to think that things having weight or lightness could come from number was nonsensical, according to Aristotle. How can number give an object weight? It didn't make any sense, according to him. Plato, Aristotle's teacher, had yet another idea. Plato believed that all objects that we see around us in the world are just imperfect reflections of perfect and eternal blueprints known as forms that exist in an alternate reality. This was even true, he claimed, for concepts such as numbers. Take for instance the number 2. According to him, that number 2 in its abstract exists in that alternate heaven-like reality, while in the world around us we see the reflection of that concept when we, for instance, see two objects. Aristotle made the following distinction between the theory of Pythagoras and Plato. In Plato's view, he wrote, numbers exist apart from sensible things. Sensible things are the things around us. While the Pythagoreans say that the things themselves are numbers. The things themselves are completely made out of numbers. So that was the crucial distinction between the two. But Aristotle disagreed with Plato as well. He did not believe that numbers exist separate from the things that they count. Consider, for instance, someone walking from point A to point B. Does that mean that that line of the walk, which is a geometric object, exists separate from that walk in some alternate reality? That sounds absurd. And if that line of the walk would truly exist in some reality, where would that line be located? It just didn't make sense according to Aristotle. Plato also could not explain how the forms, being eternal and unchanging, could introduce change in the world. How can something unchanging create change? That doesn't make sense either. Plato tried to address this problem by stating that the objects in the world participate in those eternal forms, but Aristotle rightly claimed that this explained nothing. We quote, "To say the forms are patterns and the other things participate in them is to use empty words and poetical metaphors." By the way, Aristotle did believe that objects had a form with a small f. We've already discussed that. But since we never observe the form or shape of an object apart from the object itself, as Plato claimed, he felt little reason to assume that those things, the object and the form, exist separate from each other. We always see them combined. We never see a form apart from the object. Aristotle also criticized his predecessors for specifying only a possible material out of which the universe was made, either atoms or numbers and so on. But they didn't name the mechanism by which the world was formed. So if you say the world is made of water, how can water create all the objects that we see around us? How did that happen? He writes, "The wood does not manufacture a bed and the bronze a statue, but something else must be the cause of that change." So you can say a table is made of wood, but that doesn't explain how that table was made. So we need to go into the causes, the mechanism of how the universe was created. So let's do that. According to Aristotle, the only way to fully understand something is to understand its four causes. We go into all four in a moment. But first let's look at the word causes. The Greek word for cause is aitia, which is perhaps better translated as explanation. So perhaps we should have called it the four explanations for something to exist. But somehow in the literature the word cause is used as a translation. So let's go through all four of them. We have the material cause, which refers to the material an object is composed of. That is what the previous philosophers had attended to. They thought it was made of water, fire, and so on. But we also have the efficient cause, which refers to the agent that has produced the object. For instance, a craftsman can produce a table. The third cause is the formal cause, which refers to the shape of the arrangement of an object. And the fourth cause, called the final cause, or telos, refers to the purpose of an object. And that final cause we'll discuss a little bit further because it becomes the most important one. The final cause, according to Aristotle, describes the potential of an object. For instance, oil is flammable, for it has the potential to burn. This potential exists even when the oil is not burning. It is the oil's final cause. It is what it is meant to do, Aristotle thought. An external cause can then turn that potential into an actuality. For instance, fire, an external cause, can ignite that oil and make that potential in an actuality by causing it to burn. Interestingly, Aristotle believed that potentiality of an object is not just a figment of our imagination, it is in fact a legitimate type of being. According to Aristotle, it was idiocy to believe that it is not the case, since this would mean that, quote, the moment a man lays down his shovel, he would no longer have that skill. That skill of digging a hole remains in potentiality even if the person is not even holding a shovel. Aristotle likely got that concept of those final causes of things from his study of biology. For instance, our organs all seem to have a purpose or a function. For instance, the heart seems to have the purpose of pumping around blood. Similarly, Aristotle believed that stones have the purpose of falling down to the center of the universe, as he believed. It took 2,000 years for people to realize that it is not the stone that inherently has a purpose to fall downwards, but that it is in fact the earth that exerts a gravitational force on the stone itself. It is not the stone that wants to move down, it's the earth that pulls him down via gravity. Very curious way to think, but that's how it went on for 2000 years, even after Aristotle's death. In biology, the idea of final causes lasted even longer. In the 19th century, Darwin finally replaced it by the theory of natural selection, or evolution. It isn't that the heart was created in order to pump around blood. The heart doesn't have an inherent purpose to pump around blood. But instead, creatures without a heart just had a lesser chance of survival, and that's why we have hearts. Evolution doesn't have a set purpose, a fixed goal that it moves towards. It's just survival of the fittest, that is all. So, this was quite something. We've come to the end of the first part. There's also a second part, and in that second part we'll look at his theory on God, which will be even more fantastic than the stuff we've already discussed. See you next time.